Hey everyone! For the past few years now, I have been learning about and taking care of honeybees. And over that time, I've received so many questions pertaining to the bees, some of the most common having to do with the queen honeybee. What does she look like? How do you find her in the hive? Um, when you talk about grafting or breeding queens, making queen cells, what do you mean by all of that? How do you put the little mark, a little colored mark on the queen's back? And why do people do that in the first place? So I thought it'd be fun to maybe put together a little bit of a video and show you the process that I go through to convince a hive that it needs a queen. Walk them through the process of getting that queen made, getting her mated, and if successful, applying a mark to her back that helps us identify her moving forward more easily. There are numerous ways this can be done. Some are much more efficient, some are more successful than what I'm going to show you. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to just give you an up-close look at these amazing little creatures. So let's go ahead and grab some protective equipment, jump over here into one of the hives in the apiary and see what we can learn. So this is the box that I'm going to be using to raise new queen honeybees in. And I've actually set this box up very differently than the other colonies that you actually see here in the apiary. This one only has 4 frames in it, and I've chosen specific frames that have different types of resources in them. One of the frames, for example, in the back here, is actually totally empty. It's just drawn wax comb that the bees can store things in later if they need to. The black frame that you'll see here has a bunch of what we'll call honeybee larvae of various stages of development. Those are there just to make sure that this group of bees has what they need, just to be convinced that it's an ongoing concern. The frame next to that, right here in the middle, is actually loaded with pollen. And the bees use the pollen to help feed that larva and help it develop and grow into something that'll eventually be an adult. The frame next to it here is going to have some honey and other things in there, just once again to help supplement the hive as well. And then the frame next to it is a temporary frame that I've put in here, and it's loaded with eggs, and very, very recently hatched eggs that we will be using to graft queen cells with, and you'll get to see what those look like in a moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this frame out of here, and I'm not too worried about these bees. Most every bee in this particular box right now is very young, but what you'll notice, and young bees don't tend to be terribly aggressive, but they're covering this frame right now because they are feeding these recently hatched eggs, which are pretty much 24 to 36 hour old larvae. And I'm going to be looking for very specific ones to put in these queen cells. And so anyway, let me remove the bees from this frame gently, and we'll go inside and see what the grafting process looks like. So this is the grafting station. I've taken the frame of drawn comb with the recently hatched eggs and brought it inside. And what I'm going to be doing is taking this little tool. It's called a Chinese grafting tool, a little piece of bamboo with a plastic, I don't know, little plunger, little doodad. Not going to explain how it works. Feel free to research that on your own. But these little cups right here are what we call queen cell cups, and they're little plastic things. And what's going to happen is I'm going to try to put one of the larvae, and I'm not even going to, well, I might try to zoom in, but I don't really know if you're actually going to be able to see anything in here. Inside each one of these cells at the very bottom is a little tiny C-shaped larva, and it's starting to kind of curl and grow, but these are 24 hours old, or at least 24 hours hatched. And I'm going to use this tool to scoop those out of the bottom of the cell, just by dipping it in there, and I will then deposit it into this cup. Once the cup is completed, I will then put it into a specially made frame sitting over there, and they will hang in the hive upside down, just like that. And so what I'll do is, when I'm all finished here, I'll take the entire frame, put it back in the hive, and let the bees hopefully turn these into peanut-shaped queen cells, and you'll get to see what those look like maybe in about 5 days. So stay tuned. Okay, so I finished the grafts actually yesterday, and I've put this middle frame in here. You'll see a Q on it for queen. And let's go ahead and just see what the bees are doing right now with it. And my hope is that we'll see a number of nurse bees weighing this thing down. And sure enough, there are plenty on there. Clustering together, and what they're doing is working on each of those little cups. You can't really see the cups very much right now because the bees are fully covering them, but they're feeding those baby larvae that we grafted into those cups, a substance called royal jelly. And that's going to be the diet of the larva that'll eventually be used to help it develop into a queen. So we'll check on this in another 4 days and see what things look like. Hopefully we'll have big peanut shapes. Okay, we are on day 9 since I inserted the grafting frame back into the hive. And we're going to check a couple things out here. I've actually taken a peek already just to make sure that I can pull these things out with one hand, just to make it easy on myself. And the good news is we've got some queens that have taken. So let me try to carefully lift these guys out. And you'll see, this is once again, oh, hold on. It is a little breezy today, so maybe the wind will help blow some of these bees off. Probably just a couple days removed from the queens that are in these cells will be hatching out. They'll be fully adult queens, ready to look for a mate, well, multiple mates, and hopefully begin laying eggs in a couple weeks. But this is what they look like. I had mentioned about 1.5 to 2 inch long peanut shaped looking things. Well, this is what they are. I'll show you something in a second that has one of these queen cells that's growing on one of the frames that's actually in here. Always something to be aware of, but this is pretty exciting. So of the 20 cells I tried to graft, it looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like 9 of them took, which for me, I'm pleased. All I need is a good handful of them, so this will give me plenty of queens to help take care of some of the other hives in the apiary. So we'll check on this probably tomorrow. What I'll do is take some of these cells and put them into what's called a queen castle, and this is what we will use to try to get some of these queens mated and laying eggs so that we can create some new hives out of them. So that's where we are today. We'll check back tomorrow. Wait a minute before we go. I just remembered I told you I'd show you one of the frames in the hive where the bees were developing a queen cell naturally as opposed to any kind of grafting. And you can probably notice it if you're looking there at the center of the video screen. But this is that natural peanut shape where the bees have identified a really young larva, which they said, hey, let's go ahead and turn this lady into a queen, monarchy, I don't know, whatever I wanted to call it, but there it is. And this has probably been started probably in the last 4 or 5 days, 5 at the most, I'm thinking, just because the cell itself is open on the bottom. They have not capped it yet. There is a larva developing in it, but I would suspect they will cap this off before the end of today. And I will either leave this cell in the hive and let this colony try to regenerate itself and remove all of the other queen cells. Once again, every hive can only have one queen. If she comes out of this cell or one of the other queens comes out of the grafted cells that are currently in there, they will try to kill each other. So I can't leave them in the same hive when they're coming out of these little cells. So anyway, just thought I'd show you that. This is once again a queen cell in her natural state. So it is now day 10 since we grafted the queen cells, and I have since removed those cells from the hive we looked at yesterday. There's 3 of them right there, and they are sitting on top of just something I pulled together with some leftover wood. There's something in the beekeeping world that we call a queen castle. I just made a box that is segmented into 3 separate compartments. On the side facing us, there's a little entrance hole in the middle. On the opposite side, there are exit holes or entrance holes on either corner. So they're all facing different directions just so the bees can have their own private entrance. But what I'm going to do is I'll remove one of these top covers, and we're going to slide the queen cell into the box. So let's just see what's currently in here. I did give them a slight puff of smoke a little bit earlier just to make sure they knew we were coming. If you're curious, the little yellow cap there is just something I can remove if I wanted to take a quick peek into the hive or add some supplemental feed through a jar through that hole. But once again, we have 3 frames in each of these compartments. There are no queens in any of these compartments, and the bees have gotten used to that for a while, and they said, hey, we want a queen. So the hope is I'm going to take one of these queen cells, slide it in between 2 of these frames that already have some young baby larvae that are being developed, and some honey and other resources in the hive. And in a couple of days, I expect the queen to hatch out, and probably within a week after that, she'll go on her mating flights. And hopefully a week or 2 after that, we're going to see evidence that she was successful and there will be eggs in the hive. So essentially what I'm going to do in here is, well, let me make room. I'm just going to convince the bees to kind of separate a little bit, give myself a gap. And I'm just going to simply slide this right in between the frames. Right there, and make sure that I kind of squeeze these a little bit together just to make sure that cell doesn't go anywhere. And I'll close it up, and we're just going to leave this hive alone for a while. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of these 2 hives. I'm also going to do it over here as well. This is somewhat interesting. Sometimes if you're not sure that the bees are going to accept the queen cell, maybe you just made them queenless within the recent hour or so, you might want to go an extra level to try to protect that queen cell, and you drop it in this little orange sleeve that I have. It's just the queen cell protector. Same story though, you just drop it into the hive, and it keeps the other bees in that hive from tearing a hole into the queen cell itself and trying to kill the queen in case they think they already have one. So anyway, I'll do that with this hive and a couple more hives in the apiary, and then we'll check on them maybe in a couple weeks. All right, till then. Well, this is an exciting day. I figured I'd take a quick moment to tell you about it. It's been about a week since the queens would have hatched from the queen cells that we placed inside that queen castle. And it's also the first day that we've actually had good weather. It's been really, really cold the last couple of days, and the bees have, for the most part, stayed inside their hives. But today, it's pretty temperate, and it's early afternoon, and something special has been happening. I'll kind of use this little congregation of bees right here as our indicative example. It is mating day, and this is pretty much the first time the queens have been leaving the hives to go try to find some drones, and likewise the drones have been interested in finding some queens. And she's going out on her mating flights, and hopefully within the next week and a half, we're going to begin seeing evidence that she was successful by actually seeing eggs laid on the frames that are inside of their respective compartments. So basically what happens is the queen will leave her hive, and a number of attendant bees will stand at the entrance and wait for her to return. I believe that she's actually away right now simply because there were periods of time where there were lots and lots of drones flying around here because I think they knew she was there, and there are no longer any drones hanging out here right now. I do expect many to return at some point once the queen actually makes it back. But anyway, throughout the day, this hive will be active. I suspect we'll see similar activity with the hive there on the far left, and we'll just keep our eyes out. Once again, it's mating time, so go get them, girl, and we'll see what happens. Well, it has been about 26 days since we started this grafting process, and I figured I might take a peek into the queen castle here and see if anything's happening. My hope is that we'll see a big, fat, juicy queen in there. Hopefully, she's already started laying eggs. It's possible that we may have to wait until next week to see that, but I figure I'll take a peek anyway because I've got some time on my hands. So let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do is just alert the bees that I'm coming. I'm just going to remove this little cap and give them a very, very light puff of smoke just to let them know that, well, hopefully I'm not a threat. And let's go ahead and maybe stabilize the view a little bit and see what we can see. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. And one of the first things I'll notice in here is this is where we had placed the queen cell before. And I'm going to go ahead and just simply kind of break that apart a little bit, show you what they've done to it. And you'll notice they've pretty much removed all that peanut shape. You know, they've cleaned out the cell. Obviously something came out of it, and they've just been kind of repurposing the wax, propolis stuff, maybe for other things in the hive. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside. And give them just a nice calming puff of smoke. And the first thing I'm gonna do is remove the outer frame just to give myself some working room. It's possible that if there's a queen in here, she will be on this frame. So I do want to keep a lookout. Okay, let's see what we can see. Now, try to hold this without dropping it. This stuff that you'll see up, actually this entire frame is full of honey. And the stuff up here that's capped, this is the white wax cappings, is basically telling me that this is honey that's totally ready to go. They can use it. It's what we would traditionally call honey. The stuff that is not capped down here, it still maybe has kind of a liquid looking gloss to it, is still being dehydrated. The water content is too high. They're trying to get the sugar ratio up a little higher, and they'll continue fanning that, dehydrating it, and until it actually becomes what we want to refer to as honey. So that's what's going on here. I don't see the queen on this frame. I wouldn't expect to see her on this frame because a queen typically does not hang out on honey frames. I'm gonna do a quick flip on this just to see. Nothing going on there. It's pretty much just extra storage space that they'll be able to use. I'll go ahead and set this frame aside briefly. And then I'm gonna expect to see her maybe on this one. Queen's like hanging out in the middle. All right, and there she is. You might say, how did you see her so quick? Well, she is right here walking around the hive, and she is slightly larger than the other worker bees that are around her. Pretty much nearly every other bee in this hive is also female, but you'll notice that her patterning is, she's right by my thumb there, walking around right on the edge. She has a larger abdomen than the other bees. She also has on her thorax, it just happens to be nice, shiny, and bald, whereas the other bees tend to have more of a hairier thorax. I'm gonna look around real quick on this frame, so pardon my time here. I just want to see if there's any evidence that she's actually been laying eggs yet. Her body has gotten larger than when she first came out as a virgin queen, and that is good news. It means that something's happening inside of her physiologically that is at least equipping her to be able to lay eggs. And you're not going to be able to see this on the video, unfortunately, but there are eggs in here. They're just so tiny and the lighting is so horrible, you're not going to be able to see them. So I'm going to actually do something. I'm going to go ahead and claim the queen real quick. I'm going to
use a little tool I use here to help mark the queens. I'm just gonna go pick her up off the frame. Oh, her and every other bee. I'm just gonna drop her in there. And I'm gonna show you what I do to mark a queen. I didn't wanna mark her prior to confirming that she's been mated and successfully laying eggs, because I don't wanna do anything to make the other bees think something's wrong with her. Hold on. I'm gonna reassemble this hive. Notice I'm trying to be as careful as I can, just to move things slowly. I don't want to smash bees or anything else like that. They don't typically find that very helpful. Okay, so the queen is now inside this container, and what I'm going to do, there's a little plunger here with a soft piece of foam, and of course the other bees smell the fact that she's there. And I'm going to push her up against here. And in doing that, it's once again a padded container, and I'm just putting her in a position where her thorax is available to me. And I'm going to take this non-toxic paint pen, shake it up a little bit, and prime up the marker. I think I've mentioned to some people that every year has a different color associated with it. That is used to indicate when a queen was bred, just so that you can know how old she is if you ever open up the hive. Last year's color was green. The prior year to that was red. So in 2020, we're going to use blue, and I'm just carefully, not pressing any force, I'm just putting a little blue dot on her back. And I'm gonna let that dry for a few moments. And I feel like she's had a good dry time. Let me set that down just real briefly so I can put my lid on the marker. I will, incidentally, if I just left this container here, all of the other bees, or many of the other bees, would eventually start crowding around this mesh frame. In fact, you can already tell they're smelling the fact that her pheromones are there. And if I left this here, this thing would be covered, absolutely, with so many bees. But I'm gonna go ahead and remove the plunger. Now, I don't want her to fly away, she probably won't, but anyway, she's in there. Well, let me see. Can you see the blue dot on her? I'll try to put her on here, and now look quick. See the blue dot on her back? Oh, get off the bees. There you go, right there. Now they're all kind of surrounding her and just checking her out, making sure she's okay. And she'll end up crawling down between those frames again, and hopefully that's the last time I ever have to touch her. And she can do her part to making the colony succeed. And so we wish her the best. But that's pretty much A to Z what it takes to make a queen. And you see actually, this is kind of a fun little thing. You'll notice the bees have kind of formed almost a circle around her. There's actually a technical name for that. It's called her retinue. Oftentimes you'll have the attendant bees that are just checking her out, making sure she's clean. They groom her, they feed her, and they just kind of make sure that she's well equipped to manage the hive well. So let's see if we can, I think they're actually trying to lick off her paint, but unfortunately it's fully dried, so they're not going to be able to. Anyway, there's your queen, and best of luck to her. So. Okay, well, here we are. I decided I'd take one last peek here just to see how the queen was doing. And just a moment ago, she was there checking out different holes in the comb. I think as I removed the frame, she's saying, hey, what's going on? I need to seek refuge somewhere. But here she is, just walking around the perimeter of the frame. She's healthy and happy and just doing her thing. So we're gonna let her be and just wish her the best once again. Thanks for watching. It's been fun for me to do this, and I hope it's been educational for you. And if any of you ever have any questions, just feel free to reach out, and let's have a conversation. Bees are fun to talk about. So anyway, my best to you as well. Take care.